Hi there, and welcome back to Straight Talk for Mental Health. I'm Karen Goslin, part of KG and Associates, and today I have my associate again, Janice D'Souza. Welcome. She's a therapist in our clinic that works specifically with teens and young adults. And today we have a special guest, Marlene Kazman. Marlene is a family lawyer. She's been practicing family law since 1993. I was doing the math on that last night. So you've been doing this almost as long as I've been doing this.
Yeah.
So she's well experienced. Marlene tells me that she grew up in a family of lawyers, so had a strong passion for law and justice and fair play. I really like that. You sent that word over to me last night, fair play. I even thought about that for a bit, fair play. She works with men and women, fathers and mothers, helping families through the divorce process. So this is our topic today. We are at the beginning of February. So January is past, but not that far. I think we were a little late pulling the trigger on this one, Janice, but we're not too late. I read, and I think you did as well, Janice, that January was the divorce month. And when I looked it up, it was this interesting description that said people will buck up for one last holiday, buck up for one last holiday. And then the Christmas tree is coming down and we're all going back to work. And that's when people apparently rush to offices of lawyers to start the divorce process. I'll be interested in your thoughts about that, Marlene. My own experience, having run the clinic for a number of years, has been it's been in the summer. Like I always saw July as the divorce month because mothers would reach out to me because the children were in between school years and they would want to set up daycares, new schools, sell the house over the summer so that it didn't disrupt the children's school year. So interesting. Is it July or January or maybe both, or maybe it's all 12 months? I don't know. So this is our topic today, divorce. And I want to look, obviously, we've got Marlene on our team today. So we really want to, for the listeners, understand some of the legal issues that maybe can inform our listeners on what they should be thinking of legally for divorce. And then we'll see how this goes, whether we can include some of our mental health issues today, or we might even need to do a part 2 next week. But we'll see where this conversation gets us. So welcome to both of you. So Marlene, why don't we start off? I don't know if you want to even just talk about what your thoughts are about January's divorce month, or what other trends you see happening in divorcing families here in Toronto.
Okay, so I'll address a few of those topics. First, very often, January is a little busier. I mean, people pull the plug at every month of the year, but very often people do. I do hear a lot about, oh, let's just get through Christmas. And that's often when there's children, especially younger children. So they want to keep the family environment and have the one last Christmas for the family. So I do see that, but again, every month of the year is open season for people ending the marriage. You spoke about trends. So there's a number of interesting trends that I have seen. And the trends, I'm going to break it down into two pieces. One, children, and two, money. So when it comes to kids, what I have seen lately is an expanded willingness of the courts to equitably distribute the parenting time amongst both parents. In 2021, there were significant changes made to the Divorce Act, and that's for married people, and the Children's Law Reform Act. So, and this is for the parenting piece. Obviously, people who are living in common law don't have access to the Divorce Act because they were never married. But the changes in the two legislations mirror one another. So the court is looking at a wider variety of factors and considerations in making orders. What I have personally seen, and I looked at this carefully last night, I read a bunch of decisions, is the courts are coming down hard on gatekeepers. What's a gatekeeper? It's the parent who's controlling the child's time and doling out little bits of time to the other parent. No, you can't see the kids, but for these 2 hours here, and those 2 hours there. That's the gatekeeper. Unreasonable, controlling behaviors. The gatekeeper has the mindset that the children are almost a possession, and the gatekeeper gets to control how the possession spends its time. So I see a big willingness on the bench to nip it in the bud. What I saw, before, I'm sure you've heard the buzzwords parental alienation, and that's thrown around a lot by everybody. And to cross the threshold truly into alienation, there's a lot of factors, a lot of boxes that have to be ticked. But instead of going all the way to a trial to correct the wrong of the alienating parent, I see the bench demonstrating a willingness to nip it in the bud and make significant changes to parenting time and decision making so that no one parent gets the upper hand and the control. Just last night, I read a December decision of Justice McGee, brilliant judge, and the children were 1 and 3. And obviously every case depends on the individual circumstances, but in this particular case, the father was given equal parenting time at an interim motion stage. And that's the kind of thing you wouldn't see so much years ago, but you're seeing it now. You're really seeing judges focus on nipping it in the bud, righting wrongs. And I wouldn't say punishing the gatekeeping parent, but fixing it and not allowing the gatekeeping parent to continue. So that's what I'm seeing on the child front. I don't know how much time you want to give me for this, but I'll continue until you tell me to be quiet. How's that?
Yeah, I know you've got a money issue that you want to talk about the trend on money, but I just want to say, and I'm sure Janice, you're thinking what I'm thinking, right? This is such good news for the families we work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where I might do some of the family work and the parents work, you're working with the children growing up in the midst of this. I'm happy about this because what I see is that I mean, gatekeeping I'd heard, but not applied to divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting word. I hadn't really heard that applied in this situations. And it's good news because when parents mismanage their grief, that is where we start to see the alienation and now this gatekeeping. And so if the legal system is going to support that type of a message to the parents, that makes our job easier in providing that emotional and mental health support, because it puts the parents in a position where they have to manage their grief differently. If the law is going to say, no, we are going to work more towards equitable time, and the alienation and gatekeeping is not going to be permitted. And this must be good news for your work with the children and teens, Janice. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was thinking the same thing, the concept of the gatekeeping, because I've heard a lot of parents who are not the gatekeepers kind of bring this piece up where it's I'm not, even though I have equal custody, or the other parent isn't giving me as much time. And when I've worked with young adults of parents who have been divorced, they do bring this up as well. It's oh, I only get to see my mom or dad for a few really few hours in the week, as opposed to constantly spending time with that gatekeeping parent. So that concept, the word you're using, is very interesting. And like
Yeah,
Karen said, I've heard of gatekeeping, but never applied to this
right,
context.
right, right.
So Marlene, just on those, do you have thoughts around when you've worked with children or teens of divorcing families or parents, how that gatekeeping parent or that concept of it has affected those children and teens?
Well, I don't really see the actual children in my practice because I deal with my client.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's a conference or a motion or a trial or a questioning, I get to meet the other parent or the other party. So I never really see how it affects the child. But in my own personal experience, my own personal life experience, I am familiar with children who have had to suffer through the gatekeeping and the inequality and some alienation tactics. And what I've seen in my own experience is, once the child is old enough to vote with their feet, they very often do.
Mhm.
and they push away and they push against and back away from the gatekeeping parent. And very often, what I think is at play is there's some mental illness, some unwellness with the gatekeeping parent. And it's my own pet theory based on my own years of experience that when I see people splitting up with diapers, what does that mean? They're splitting up with really little kids, babes. You know, and it's such a busy time when you've got a newborn or you have a 1 and 3 or a 2 and 4. Your hands are so full with taking care of your family and work and whatever, that when you have the mindset to say, my spouse is so awful that I can't remain in a relationship with them, very often there's mental illness at foot.
Yeah.
Sometimes both. But as soon as I see that there's diapers, it's just my experience that somebody, sometimes both, has got some very serious mental health issues, personality disorders. I see that all the time. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not pretending to be, but we all have available to us, you know, medical resources and doctors' opinions, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, that's my take on the kids,
Yeah.
that very often they vote with their feet when they're old enough to do so.
Yes, and that's so important in the work that we do to empower the children and teens in our clinic, because what we work on, you know, is I created this word actually just this morning with a client, detriangulation, right? That's the word, right? So because it's like, how do we get children and teens out of the middle of their parents, their divorcing parents? And if the gatekeeping can be, you know, attended to in the courts or through the legal process, that will make that job easier, because triangulated kids and teens, you know, are having a loss of self, usually enmeshed with that gatekeeper, and then all kinds of, you know, emotional issues and mental issues, you know, start to develop for that child. Having worked with you for a period of time, Marlene, and I know we got to get onto the money issues in a second, but I know that you do have your ear out for that, because I've heard you say things like the discomfort of discussing legal issues with a client on the phone in the earshot of their children, right?
Mhm.
Because that all of a sudden, you know, I'm assuming what you meant is that that conversation changes, because they're not just talking to you, they're talking to you in a way that I guess supports that gatekeeping with that child. So I'm going to badmouth my ex to my
Mhm.
lawyer, knowing my kids can hear me. And it's kind of this like more manipulative way of managing grief, or a product of the mental health issues or the emotional turmoil, but doing it in a way that supports the gatekeeping.
It's rampant, and nowadays we always put into agreements in order a non-denigration clause, a non-discussion with the children clause. No third party is allowed to denigrate, no third party is allowed to discuss, even clauses that prevent parties from posting stuff about their dispute or their case, posting it on social media.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
a lot of these gatekeeping parents are very clever. I think some of them would lay awake at night trying to think up creative and inventive ways to screw over their ex-spouse or to bring the child into the conflict. And of course, they
Yeah.
always feel empowered because they think they're right and the other person's wrong or incapable or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
so
I mean, we could do a whole hour on this alone. I'm starting to feel protective of my clients that sometimes can act this way, because and I meant to say this actually at the beginning. The psychiatric community has deemed divorce the second most stressful life event. And it takes the best of us down. And that can include all kinds of behaviors, including the gatekeeping, because of the sheer loss of control,
mhm.
deep grief, shock, you know, a myriad of emotional experiences. And so the best of us can start bleeding into gatekeeping, just as a sheer panic response. It's not healthy, and we can work together to help these families. But um, you know, people always, whenever I give out that stat, almost like 99% of the time clients will say, what's number one? And what is number one deemed by the psychiatric community is death of a child. And I don't mean to be overly dramatic, but that is where we rank divorce in the overall spectrum of life stressful events. So yeah, it's a complicated issue, and we can be at our worst. We can be at our worst during this. But it's good. I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing this morning in terms of what measures are getting put in place. And you're telling us some things that are really important in terms of kind of legally supporting the family in a direction that supports the emotional recovery as well, which is really, really good to see. It's been a long time in coming. So the second part, you said the other trend had to do with money. What are you seeing about money with divorcing parents or families?
Okay, so a continuous for years is, hiding assets and hiding income. That will never stop. So very often we involve professionals, money professionals, accountants, valuators, forensic accountants to step in to help figure out what really is income of payer, what really is that business worth. So that's one trend, although that's been around for a long time, is having third-party professionals come in to do the sort of valuation exercises. But what's more important is what I see is and this comes from a case called Colucci, a Supreme Court case, is the duty of the payor to be open and honest about income. So if payor is paying based on an agreement or order that says payor makes $100,000 a year and he'll pay based on that. I said he, because very often it is he, but not always. And then all of a sudden payor's making $500,000 a year. It's payors' duty to inform recipients so that child support can be adjusted appropriately. The courts are recognizing that children, they've recognized it for a long time, but they're really coming down hard on payors who are underpaying child support. There's another case called Michelle and Graydon, also landmark decision. This was a father who underpaid child support for years and years and years. And mom was, I believe, living in social assistance, housing, etc. So the one child had a very different lifestyle depending on which parent she was with. So court ordered a significant retroactive award to benefit the child. So there is a willingness on the part of the court to make sure and do what they have to do, including significant retroactive awards, to make sure the child benefits. Another trend is we're seeing significant spousal support awards. And there's also a recent development in the tort of family law violence. So that a tort is a civil wrong. That's all it is. It's doing something wrong, but not criminal. So now that is an independent tort. So that can be raised in the context of the matrimonial proceedings. And so that's a separate head of damage other than, your equalization payment or child or spousal support. If there has been violence, and that can be emotional, verbal, financial, physical, that is an independent wrong that can be corrected with a sum of money. So that's a new thing. And that's something to be on the lookout for. In the COVID atmosphere, I think we've all seen a lot of mental illness come out or be displayed. And very often that leads to one party being abusive to another. And watch out, because the tort of family violence has landed.
Interesting. This is really interesting, because I often hear complaints from clients about the family court system and the lack of fairness. And it sounds like, or just like how long it goes on for. And, so some of this is making me feel more optimistic about where the courts are evolving and how the law is evolving to be more, to kind of jump in sooner and to have a higher level of accountability for, misbehavior in the whole process.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I think that's true. The courts, you can get into the court on an urgent basis in certain circumstances, and people try to abuse the urgency threshold and the court just shuts them down. But also I've seen least in Newmarket, there's a pressing motions list. So when you're not quite urgent, but it's really important and needs to be addressed quickly, they'll even deal with you on a pressing basis. So I do see if you want to have one overarching theme, it's the theme of fairness, and the courts really trying very, very hard to level the playing ground and doing it early before
Yeah.
status quos develop.
Yeah, to me, in this process, everybody wins, right? In the
Yep.
long run, right? The divorcing parents, so there may be some frustrations initially, and good for the families. Like, to me, it's like earmarking all of these pieces that have been part of the mismanagement of the grief, and how it plays out financially, and then the parenting schedule, and how it gets so messy. But if the legal system is catching up to all of that and putting in some stop gaps on these pieces, then it keeps the legal process moving quicker or more efficiently or cleaner, and probably will support the work that Janice, you and I do with these families, because there's an accountability, that was not always there before. So to me, like, when I start to hear some of the elements you're talking about, my bells start going off, being like, yeah, these are the elements we try to support with our clients. And if the lawyers and the therapists can be giving the same messages, that's even easier, because otherwise we're trying to help them manage their grief better, but yet they can get away with things in the court. But if they can't get away with those things anymore, then it's just a more consistent message, which I think, everybody wins in the end.
Yeah,
So,
it's like a step in the right direction for sure. And it's nice to see like all kind of three systems working together, like lawyers, the courts, therapists, like
yeah, for
It's good.
sure.
And you may have heard of the child support guidelines or the spousal support advisory guidelines, and those
Yeah.
are money. So more recently, there has been a set of guidelines produced by the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. And I see the judges relying on those, considering those consistently, and placing significant reliance and consideration. The buzzword is consideration of the factors in there. So another thing, that's another trend, is these AFCC guidelines, and council are expected to know them and at least consider them. I mean, in every family is unique and special. So but council must be aware of them and review them and know them.
Yeah, that's great. Good news. Good news. Where do you still see people getting stuck? Like, as these improvements are evolving, what do you see as kind of people, where people can still get stuck?
What I see for payors, that's the one who's paying the child support and or the spousal support, is it's hard to go to a model where you're together and it's an economic union, to now that you're living apart, but you're paying that person and supporting that person's household. I see a lot of payors having a very, very hard time, and this isn't new, but having a hard time cutting that check, making that payment, giving the disclosure of their assets and income that is required to determine their income. Is child and spousal support. Once entitlement to spousal support is proven, and child support's pretty, straightforward. Child support's paid to the residential parent in a nutshell. But I see payors being very resistant to providing that disclosure. I had one recent client say to me, let's just mediate. I said, well, we can't. We need to know what your income is. We can't just go to mediation in a vacuum. You can't just accept the recipient to say, okay, this is a reasonable amount of money, I'll just take it. You've got to know what the income is. That's the law, and that's just the law across the land. We've decided that children are to benefit from the wherewithal of both parents. So that's always something that I see people getting stuck on. I see also people just getting stuck on, like, emotionally, that the way they dealt with their spouse during the relationship, they're still following that same pattern. And I say to people all the time, there's a new sheriff in town. You're not in that you've got a different relationship now. You're co-parenting now. You're not a couple anymore. So I say that often. There's a new sheriff in town. You don't have to behave and treat and be the same way you used to be with this person.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to co-parent peacefully. And I tell my clients, I preach to them, err on the side of the child, err on the side of peace, and err on the side of generosity.
I'm
So I don't know
writing
if you're
this, I'm
listening.
writing this down, Jen, as a peace child. And what was the third one?
Err on the side of the child, err on the side of peace,
Generosity.
and
Oh,
then
yeah.
err on the side of generosity.
Oh,
Generosity.
Yeah.
I really
yeah.
like that. I really like that. And I think like even in our last podcast, Karen, we talked about these aspects of relationships and being consistently being stuck in that negative cycle and negative patterns because we're just so used to how it was when we lived with that person. So yeah, this point that you're saying, and it really does affect like the other person as well as the children if there are any in question.
Yeah, because they will either fight against their parents, negativity or emulate it, right?
Mhm.
And then they can't really adopt their own views because it's so extreme or dramatic. The child's caught in having to adopt or rebel against, that extreme. The clinical language I always heard was it's harder to have a good divorce than a marriage. And it and I see this all the time where what you're talking about, that how I reacted to my spouse, like whatever the issues were or the reactions, it's like it's tenfold during the divorce process because now the stake of saving the marriage is gone. So it's almost like a free for all. Well, I will exaggerate how you and I communicated. I am taking that and like timesing it by 10. And then it just complicates it for everybody. I want to go back to what you said about stuckness with the payer. Are families or the courts still relying heavily on the family responsibility office, or is that done?
Oh yeah. Oh no. Oh no. Where would we be without Fro? Oh no. Fro's mandatory, and then people can opt out of it. If people get along fine and payer is readily handing over that check or that e-transfer, you can opt out of Fro. But Fro initially is mandatory. When the court makes a support order, they also make a support deduction order. Fro
Yeah.
can be cumbersome, so people sometimes say, hey, she pays me, he pays me like clockwork. I don't need Fro.
Yeah,
But we need Fro. We'd be in big trouble
that's
without
great.
Fro.
Yeah, so there's still a good partnership there, and then that can be effective in garnishing wages, I guess, and enforcing payments.
Oh, more than that. Eventually, Fro can take steps to have the driver's license suspended and then the passport.
Yes, I was just going to say that. I heard of a case recently where that happened, and that was so effective, right?
Yeah, how can a lot of people need a driver's license to do their work, to get around,
Yeah,
to do whatever they need to do. So that can be,
that's so good to
that's,
hear.
and that's, it's necessary. We need that. We need Fro.
Yeah, you've talked a couple of times today about the emotional side of divorce. So, what would be a tip or comments or anything you wanted to say to Janice and I about kind of attending to the mental health of the family or the emotional needs um, from what you're seeing at your end and how that can help work through the legal issues, but also just safeguard the family's health and emotional health during this time.
I think counseling, therapeutic intervention is very important, especially for the parents and especially for the children that are showing signs of, consequences, frailty, having a hard time coping. Some kids cope, or at least appear to cope really well, and others don't. There should be no hesitation whatsoever to begin therapeutic process. And that's so easy. It's such an easy thing to do. And I find kids very often enjoy the therapy. They're celebrated. They get to talk, and there's a grown-up who's sitting there listening, taking notes. So
Yeah.
they're not told what to do, and they're not, pushed out of the picture or dismissed. They're in the spotlight. So I think it's a great idea. Even if kids aren't showing sign of buckling under the pressure, what's wrong with a few sessions of therapy just to have the child heard and make sure that they're on solid ground? I think that should be, almost a mandatory thing.
Yeah, it
When
should
when
be.
you sit down and think about it, it like you're taking a pinking shears to the child's life. So
Yeah, that's a pretty strong visual. What do you think about that, Janice? I mean, this idea of having that sounding board, what are you seeing in some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot, especially with like teenagers and young adults, especially if like their parents were divorced when they were a little bit older. They more so have an understanding of what was going on. They were like very much in the middle, caught between the dynamics and conflict. And a lot of times, you're right, when I do work with them, it's like they just want to express everything because they're not able to go to either one parent because that parent just won't understand. Or, like we said, like they kind of put down the other parent and try to like manipulate the situation. So then at the end, the child's voice isn't really heard. So I do see that appreciation and just that openness when I do work with like these this age group where they just like so happy to be able to have that one person where they can just express everything that they've gone through and like talk about both parents and how they've made them feel without feeling like judged or feeling like what they're saying is gonna be criticized or like questioned. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, how could we not benefit from having a non-judgmental, safe place to
Yeah.
express our grief of what's going on and what the hard parts are and how it feels, and just to have that validation from somebody who's like giving us their complete attention. Yeah. Marlene, how does somebody go about choosing a lawyer? Like, we hear about different types of lawyers. I mean, what should go into that decision-making process for our listeners?
okay, well, there's a bunch of factors. So sometimes it's cost driven. The more experienced a lawyer, generally the higher price they will be. But experience is important. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's that old saying, you get what you pay for. And I've seen counsel who I think haven't done a lot of family law work, or haven't done it very long. And I see some really rookie mistakes that ought not to happen. So one thing is, cheaper is not necessarily better, but of course budgets have to be respected. A word of mouth referral is always good. I mean, people have got all kinds of social media, lawyers got all sorts of social media out there, but I think a word of mouth referral from a friend or from another lawyer, or if you could find a referral from another lawyer who practices in the same field, that's that speaks volumes. Not everybody's going to have that, but let's say you get referrals from your friends, your family, to 3 family law practitioners. You can interview them, and I think that's an important thing. A face-to-face interview. I prefer one-on-one meeting. We've got large boardrooms here. I prefer that you get a sense of the person. And in family law, my clients, they're telling me everything. Like, there's some very delicate, intimate details that they have to reveal to me. Of course, everything is confidential, but when you go to the doctor and you say, my side hurts, you get the x-ray, the blood test, the MRI, I need all that same level of information too, to defend my person, to protect my person, to position my client. So when they're going to tell me all this really, tender, intimate, all sorts of details and information, whether it looks positive on them or negative on them, you want to make sure you're comfortable with your lawyer. If you get a bad sense, or a sense that you don't like this person at the meeting, run. Don't stay. It's not going to work out good. You have to, I'm sorry to use the word like, but you have to feel comfortable and
Yeah.
safe with your lawyer, and you have to feel confident that your lawyer is going to listen and is going to position you and is going to give you sound advice. And sound advice does not mean I'll tell you what you want to hear. It does not mean that. I tell clients all the time, I would never lead you down the garden path, because I don't want you to lose an emotion and then turn around and hate me. So even if you don't like the answer, I'm going to tell it to you straight. I would never mislead somebody and tell them, oh, of course you're going to get, ABC. When if I don't believe that's true, I would never do that. And I hate to see that happen. So you need confidence in your lawyer that they're going to listen, that they're going to do their best to protect you and position you. And listen is important. And you have to feel comfortable with the person that you're opening the kimono to and paying a lot of money to.
Definitely, definitely. There has to be that fit and trust. And I love what you're saying, because I suppose sometimes when it's mishandled, clients get a false belief of where things could go and what's possible.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like a short term, maybe feeling better, but in the long term, it doesn't go that way. And then the whole process is delayed and it gets messy
And expensive.
and expensive. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll tell people, I'm not motioning for you to get ABC because you're not going to get it based on the totality. I'll motion for you for CDE because I'm confident that we can get that, but I'm not going to go out on a limb and ask for something stupid.
What's CDE?
No, I'm saying, like, if somebody wants
Oh, I
ABC,
see.
and I'll say A's not going to happen,
Yeah.
B's not going to happen, C's got a good chance, and maybe D and E. So,
Yeah.
like, lowering the bar a little bit. And here's the next piece. Generally, costs follow the event. So if you're successful at your motion, you're going to seek costs from the unsuccessful party, and vice versa. So you don't want to motion unless you're feeling very confident and very strong, because not only will you have to pay your
Yeah.
lawyer, if you
That's
lose,
Yeah.
you're paying somebody else's lawyer, and that's got to hurt really, really bad.
Yeah. I love the straight talk, approach that you have. That really fits with how we try to work with our clients as well. And sometimes the truth is very hard to hear, but there is that piece of, and I think clients respect that in the long run, even though they're hearing things that they may not want to hear. I
Mhm.
think there is a respect, because a lot of times people are already thinking that, but to have somebody label it or reassure them or be straight with them about it, it frees people up in the end, right? And I think obviously people need that and people respect that. So if somebody was listening to our podcast today and was thinking about separating,
Mhm.
what would be the first couple of steps that you would recommend that they take?
Well, so financial disclosure is very important, and it is one of the cornerstones of family law. Very often, we see that one spouse is very hesitant to provide the full and frank financial disclosure. So if you can get your documents ready and get your documents lined up and ready to go to support your own financial statements, that's important. What I tell clients all the time is date of marriage. Get all your documents for your assets and your deductions, because your value, your net worth value at date of marriage is important, because it gives you what's called a deduction to your net family property. So I can't get into what all that means, other than it's a good thing. So if you can gather proof of what you owned at date of marriage, that's great. You want to be rich at date of marriage. So what else?
So that's the
Another
first
thing
step,
is,
really, right? To get ready for that disclosure piece.
yeah, to get ready for that disclosure piece. And another thing is, if it's yours and it's important, get it out of the house or lock it up. I know of cases where someone leaves their Rolex watch and then it's gone. And then the other side says, what Rolex watch? Maybe you lost it. I don't call a Rolex watch. So if it's important, if it's your granny's heirloom that you received, and you have any inkling that the other side is going to grab it and do something with it, get it out of the house. If it's yours, you don't have to leave it in the house. If you feel that the other side's going to grab it, you have to disclose it on your financial statement, but you don't have to leave it sitting there out in the open waiting to get plucked.
Yeah. And this might sound a little dramatic, but if somebody is considering separating from somebody who's got narcissism, I sometimes talk with clients about this financial disclosure piece because they know that their ex-partner will be hiding their money, like you talked about earlier.
Mhm.
And so this locking up in a safe outside of the home, could that include getting uh, images or copies of their partner's financial records before they announce? Is that manipulative or is that smart?
Well, I think it happens all the time, and I don't really think it's manipulative, but I think it's a good fallback and safety net. So, when your ex comes and says, "Oh, I have two bank accounts. Here they are. They're on my financial statement," and you've got photographs of bank statements for two more, that's a very helpful thing as far as
Yeah.
credibility. And the courts are very harsh
Mm,
on people who fail to disclose assets. The courts it's all about full and fair disclosure. That is the cornerstone of family law. We can't do the work without it.
yeah. I know we could talk a long time. I've got one question, and then Janice, maybe you can throw in a question as well before we wrap. How much are you relying on mediators, adjudicators, private family assessments to help in the process that you're supporting your clients through these days?
Okay, so non-court. Mediation is great. Is every family or couple suited for mediation? No. If there's a significant power imbalance,
Mm,
then not necessarily. If there hasn't been appropriate disclosure, you can't mediate because you're doing it in a vacuum. So when the circumstances are such that there's disclosure and there's not a significant power imbalance, it's great. You have a hand in the resolution. People can be far more creative in the solution than the court can. The court is bound by the laws. The court can't step outside of the jurisdiction, say, of the Divorce Act, the Family Law Act, the Children's Law Reform Act. It's stuck with what's in that book. People, with the help of their lawyers or financial advisors or parenting coaches or whomever, people can be far more creative in crafting a resolution, and certainly faster and less expensive. A trial can, even when you think, oh, it's a 2-day trial, it'll be fast, it's one issue trial. Oh, they always go longer. I've never seen them go shorter. They
mm,
always go longer. There's always a delay some way or other. So it's expensive. It's hugely expensive. So
yeah.
if you can get into a mediated process, I think it's a good way to go.
Yeah, that's good. Good points, and I do, often see mediation failing
Mhm.
when there is that power imbalance or there's a quality of narcissism or abuse. I see a lot of clients going in circles, and then it's frustrating and it deepens the grief process, and has a huge toll on the emotional health. So yeah, I think there's a time and a place for that. And
Mhm.
when there is that time and place, then it's very effective. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you can wrap up a case, in a day kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it can be very, very effective.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that be. Janice, what do you want to ask Marlene? Here, it's like ask the lawyer day here.
Yeah, Marlene, that sounds like you're doing really great work out there and like it's
Thank you.
much needed. This is more of like a personal professional question, but what do you love most about the work you do?
When I see my clients smile and happy and they appreciate the work and they're thrilled with the result, it doesn't even have to be thrilled when they're pleased with the result. Um,
Hmm.
it's a very stressful job,
Yeah.
extremely stressful job. But when I make a difference in someone's life in a positive way, or I make a difference for children, I feel really good. I have one client in particular. She's been beaten up a whole lot by her husband over the years. She lost a baby even due to his violence. She miscarried a child following assault. So I've helped her, and I've made we've made a huge difference. I can't take all the credit. Her and we've made a huge difference in her life. And that makes me feel really good. There's two little kids out there who aren't going to see their mother beaten up all the time anymore. That's
Yeah.
how amazing is that? How awful for children to grow up seeing their mother get beaten.
Mhm. Yeah, this is definitely, an area that is so delicate and painful. And, but I love what you're saying, right? Like we've kind of had this high energy through most of this podcast, and it's kind of landing in this serious place. But inevitably, that's what this is, right? We will meet families or parents or our ex-partners in so much pain and anguish of everything that has led up to this point of considering separation and divorce, and years in the making oftentimes. And I think for all of us, our commitment, right, is to free these people, free the children, to be able to get on to another chapter in their lives that they feel safer, they feel free to express, they can take better care of their jobs or their schools or their relationships. And if this is going to happen, and if whatever the family or the parents or the partners were trying that didn't work, and this needs to end, then it really is all about making their lives better, making this decision count, and whatever upheaval comes with that, so that they can lead better lives and be healthier and happier. And yeah, I think that's a deep commitment all of us have here, and other professionals helping these families. So it is stressful and painful for our clients, and stressful and demanding on us, but it's worth it in the end, right? Like we've got to make it worth it, um, because that's what we're doing this for, right?
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Well, I know we could talk a lot more, but let's wrap this for today. I think that's actually a good point to land on before we do wrap, because as much as this is complicated, we want to give our listeners hope that
Yes.
if they're going to go through this, if they're going to make this hard decision, they need to know that there are people like us in the community that can support them in different ways, to get them through this. And there has to be that hope that it's going to lead to something better and healthier for them and their children. And that there's hope in the community, and services and supports that will get them through this. So thank you so much for joining us, Marlene. Wasn't that nice to talk with Marlene today, Janice?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I often think of you and I as a team, and but we have to think of the broader team in the
Mhm.
community that we need to work with and connect with for our
Mhm.
families and clients, so that we're not doing this work in isolation. And I was thinking about this morning. It takes a village, right? It takes a
Yes.
village to help people and families through this, where they're lawyers, mediators, divorce coaches, therapists,
Mhm.
divorce financial analysts. I mean, there is now this team, that we create this village, because
Mhm.
of the complexity of the issues that the clients are facing. So
Right.
I hope that's something the listeners can feel after hearing this. So thank you
Mhm.
again, Marlene, and thank you, Janice. Marlene, do you want to share your contact information? Then Janice, I'll have you do that as well, just so that the listeners, if they do want to follow up, they have some
Sure.
resources right at their fingertips.
All right. First, thank you for inviting me to participate. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
My direct dial right to my desk. And by the way, I do answer clients on weekends when they're in distress,
Mm,
because of the nature of the work. You can't just say, "Oh, that'll wait till Monday." Not necessarily.
yeah.
So my direct dial to my desk is 416-642-5416. My email is my surname, Kazman @gzlegal.com. I work at Garfin Zeidenberg LLP, and I look forward to helping any more clients that we can share in common.
Yeah. I love that she takes calls on weekends, right? Because like
Yeah.
divorce is not on a schedule, right?
No.
Oftentimes these things will erupt, and then
Yep.
it's like they almost strike while the iron's hot to take that step, and it's not like, because of my schedule. Yeah. And
Right.
Janice, if there's families listening or parents listening or young adults, teens listening, how can they find you for that emotional support?
Yeah. So my direct line is 416-316-7686. And the email you can reach me at is the number 6, DSOUZA
Great, thank you. And we represent KG and
Yes.
Associates, Karen Goslin. So our website, www.karenrsw.com. My direct line, 647-985-0633, or at karenrsw@yahoo.ca. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a good afternoon.
Same to both of you.
Thank you.